the fear in her eyes. She started deleting things, and he was just like, holy smokes, there's something going on here that I don't know about.
It only takes like 2 or 3 really convincing videos to hit somebody right where their learning points are to kind of start shifting their opinions on any subject.
AI has entered the chat.
And now it's time to consider the path of your feet, for crying out loud.
Welcome back to Salty Saints. My name is Hayden Holm. I'm joined today by my brother Tanner. And in today's episode, we are considering the path of the feet of one couple because we believe that this couple, the experience that they have, could be super relevant to members of the church. So, Tanner, if you could pull up that video, let's watch it real quick and then pull out some reactions. For those of you who don't know, there is a really popular trend online. It's called a loyalty test. There are a handful of these kind of man on the street videos out there where couples are asked to swap phones. And this clip kind of stood apart from the others for a couple different reasons. But this is a couple that has just been asked to do a loyalty test and swap each other's phones, and they were given no heads up. So go ahead and play it.
This couple was asked to switch phones and check each other's messages, but you won't believe what happened in the end.
Do we have to do this?
I'll do it. Damn, look, she deleting messages. Wait,
no.
you deleting stuff?
Oh no. Okay. I don't have anything to say.
All right, let's clip it there if you can. I don't want this to get too heavy, but boy, a lot of emotions going on there.
Brutal. Yeah, he got destroyed. Poor guy. He found something that he was expecting or that he was hoping not to find.
It was rough.
That was really rough.
Now, why do you think, and how is this applicable to the average LDS couple?
Well, I think it's interesting because I think that and maybe I might be way off out in left field on this, but I think it's normal for couples to have their own like digital world, right? Like everyone has their own phone and their own accounts on those phones. So everyone has their own social media algorithms. And so I think you are living a different digital reality than even your spouse. Now, I think that a lot of people share a lot of stuff between their spouses, so they generally feel on the same page. But still, I think that we are probably missing a lot of interaction that our spouses are having with other content creators, influencers, people online, et cetera, that we just don't even register because it happens so fast and it happens in the in-between moments of the day. So like when I catch up with Hannah at the end of the day, she's not going to tell me everything that she saw online when she had a moment to scroll through Instagram or whatever. So, and same with me, right? Like I don't have time to replay everything. So I think that there's kind of a separate world that we're living in between the two of us.
It is kind of interesting. I think
happens for every
as soon as the average couple gets married, typically the first things they do, they move in together. In our culture, at least, they move in together. They get a joint savings account. They kind of combine everything that they have, and a lot of times because they're in college, it's just like starting fresh. It's like $0, but you have a joint bank account, and you have a crappy student apartment, and you share everything. And it's interesting because it seems like this is the only piece that is left private between husband and wife. Now, obviously, there are going to be couples out there that do have their own like separate bank accounts and stuff like that. But I am generalizing in that regard. But I do so to make a point. So I want to bring this out because I don't think that it's necessarily talked about too much, and it's a piece of technology that's evolved so quickly that I don't know that there are any like guardrails around it for adults. I do know that like for children and youth, there are a ton of guardrails around social media, but do there need to be guardrails around social media for couples, married couples? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think definitely for sure, you have the entire internet available to you in your pocket at all times, right? And so I think that you should definitely have a conversation with your spouse and say like, "Hey, these are the things that we do consume. These are
Right,
things that
right.
we don't." Right? So I think that and it's different between men and women what they use those devices for. So if you're not having that conversation with your spouse of like, this is
Yeah.
what we look at, this is what we don't, and talking with them, then it's going to be very uncomfortable when you do realize that your spouse is indulging in things that you personally wouldn't approve of.
Right.
Just like we saw in that clip, right? And that clip is an extreme example, but if you swapped phones with your spouse today, would you find things that made you like that surprised you? I guess is what I would say. Would you find things that surprised you if you swapped
And
phones
are
with your
you
spouse
talking
today?
about like
And is that a
social
good thing or is that a
media,
bad thing?
or are you talking about like text messages and stuff like that, or everything?
I'm talking largely about social media. That one was about cheating and
Yeah.
text messages from what I got from it. And that's obviously not great. I don't think that's the kind of focus we want to make on this video, though. Largely just around how social media feeds us content and how our algorithms, tailor themselves to what we see and how we react, and how that can start creating a schism between you and your spouse if you're not careful, right? That can start taking you down different
Right. 'Cause,
paths
I
you
mean,
didn't
the
even
last
know
thing
you're
you want to
going
do
down.
is wind up like that guy sitting there completely devastated. He saw his wife, like I don't know what the relationship was. I'm assuming it was somewhat special, probably boyfriend, girlfriend, if not more. And he saw her immediately, the fear in her eyes. She started deleting things, and he was just like, holy smokes, there's something going on here that I don't know about, which is wild because I'm with her in person probably more than not. So it is scary. We live in an age where you can kind of be like Dwight Schrute and live a second life, online, completely detached from everybody else.
Yeah.
And I want to read something. Consider this. All right. So this was back in 2019. President Nelson gave the following quote. He said, "Brethren, we need to do better and be better because we are in a battle. The battle with sin is real. The adversary," no, focus in on this part. "The adversary is quadrupling his efforts to disrupt testimonies and impede the work of the Lord. He is arming his minions with potent weapons to keep us from partaking of the joy and the love of the Lord." So 2019, the adversary is beginning to quadruple his efforts. What have we done as couples to hedge against that? It it seems like there's a subtle call to action within that quote, like, "Hey, you need to start getting ready. You need to start shaking things up and doing things a little bit differently,
Yeah.
or else the adversary is going to overtake you." And I think this might be one of the moments, or one of the things that you can start doing now in order to combat the adversary. Because if you look at what has changed from 2019 until now, I would say social media is probably at the forefront of that. Like, it's become increasingly more addictive. Algorithms have learned that much more. We've now brought AI into the conversation. AI has entered the chat, okay, and it is not backing out anytime soon. And so I look at all of this and I'm thinking, if we as couples in the church are not careful and we aren't on the same page and we don't put any guardrails on how we are managing our individual algorithms, because and maybe before I get there, maybe it's important to drive home the point of how algorithms even work. So the average algorithm is going to work by the content that you like. So social media, it's not designed to promote truth. It's not designed to promote things that are actually going to be beneficial for you. It's designed to promote things that are engaging. And things that are engaging don't necessarily line up with truth always. So the things that you look at, the things that you spend extra time looking at, you might not even interact with that post, but if you watch it, if you just let it run, then social media takes that as a cue and it says, okay, he watched this. Let's feed him something else that's similar to that. If you like things,
Oh, yeah.
if you comment with things, then that allows you, social media, that gives them more data saying, hey, this guy is engaging with this post, give him more content like that. And before you know it, your feed is going to be filled with content that it believes will engage you and hook you more into that platform. Now, going back to my previous point, the thing is, like, if if you were just to randomly pick up your spouse's phone and look at their feed and look at their algorithm and see what kind of content they are looking at right now or that is on their phone, you are going to get a peek into the mind of your spouse. And isn't that fascinating? That sounds fascinating, and it sounds a little scary too. Just like that young man found, like, man, some couples I know are probably going to have a really difficult time. They would struggle immensely doing something like that.
100%.
But go ahead.
Well, to that point, it's also terrifying how like fast it can change the mind of your spouse, right? Or at least how fast it can seem. Because I remember early on in my marriage, there was one time that stood out to me where we were going grocery shopping, and I was picking up some stuff and putting in the cart, and Hannah was like, "We don't need that anymore." I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I picked something else, and she's like, "No, we don't need that brand anymore either." I was like, "Oh, since when?" It's like, "Oh, since Ginny says that this other brand is better for us." And what I didn't realize is that Hannah had started following another podcast called 1,000 Hours Outside, and she was kind of going down this crunchy algorithm, and so she had found that there's some ingredients in these things that we usually eat that we're not eating anymore. And it was a good change, but it surprised me. It's like, oh, I didn't know that we were thinking about that even. That was even in our sphere of considering. Now imagine if that happens to someone's like core ideology, like their politics or their religion. Like, oh, we don't believe in tithing anymore. Oh, we're actually a Democrat or a Republican instead of conservative, vice versa. Like you can, like that can happen seemingly overnight, depending on the kind of content you consume. It only takes like 2 or 3 really convincing videos to hit somebody right where their question points are, right where their learning points are, to kind of start shifting their opinions on any subject. So, you could be having this kind of evolution of your own mind happening quietly within the algorithmic echo chamber, and your spouse has no idea it's happening because you're just too busy to talk about it, right? Until it comes out and you're like, actually, I'm a different person now.
Whoa.
It's like, oh, I didn't know. Okay, nice to meet you. Surprise. So the rate of change with, different social media feeds and things like that, just pumping you full of information, is startling. And if you're not careful and keeping in check with your spouse, husband or wife, then, you might get left behind.
Well, and the scariest
that can
part
feel
of that
very
whole
jarring.
thing is that it will not appear like they're doing anything different. You will still be with this person the same amount of time before they are different and after they are different. One of the biggest things that we've noticed ever since we started up this community of men and fathers in the church, we've noticed that there are a handful that their spouse, all of a sudden one day, they all of a sudden it just says like, "Hey, I'm not buying this anymore. Like, I don't believe this. I'm not buying it." They reveal that they are watching like Exmo and anti-member content, and then pretty much demand like, I'm taking a step back. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And it completely blindsides these brethren. They're just like, "Oh man, this is making life really difficult for me." And so it goes right in hand with what you're saying. It's interesting because there are a handful of reasons why it could be happening. I don't know. I'm not saying like the algorithm is 100% going to be the reason, but there is one thing that I do want to point out. This is from the same talk with President Nelson. He says, take an inventory of how you spend your time and where you devote your energy. That will tell you where your heart is at. So he's actually saying like, hey, take stock of how much time you're spending on social media and how much, where's your heart at? And that's the one thing that's really interesting about this. Like, tell me that's not prophetic, because today your heart can be online while your body is in your house. Your heart can be influenced and shaped by algorithms, by other influencers out there. There's this old quote. It says, "Tell me who your friends are, and I will tell you who you are." So you might be in a place where certain content might be jarring, or it might sound appealing to you. And you might say like, well, this XMO content, that didn't sound a little, that didn't sound as bad as it was made out to be, in my youth. And, and I didn't like it. I didn't comment on it, but I did, linger for a second, and then more comes in and more and more and more until eventually you form a relationship with this person. And there might be some people out there that are like, Hayden, that's crazy. You can't just form a relationship with an influencer just from algorithms. That's wild. But one of the things that we found while we were compiling research for this episode is something called the social displacement theory. And Tanner, do you want to give some information on that?
Yeah, social displacement theory talks a lot about how people begin to kind of offload the human interaction that used to take place day to day into a more digital interaction and start kind of satisfying that need for human, connection through social media and online profiles and platforms, which leads to a lot of really strange and novel problems that we have to solve, right? Because if you're satisfying that need to be around other people through a digital platform, you are going to be alone all the time, right? And what kind of impact does that have on you as you're isolated in your home, reaching out to people online who are complete strangers and discussing with them? But at the end of the day, when you turn off your phone, you are alone in your house and you haven't made any real connection with anyone moving forward. So it's the same way, like if you eat nothing but fast food, you will be malnourished, right? Even though you'll start to gain weight.
Yeah.
That paradox of I'm eating a ton of fast food, I'm gaining weight, but my body's actually starving for nutrition. I think the exact same thing happens with social displacement when I'm interacting with a ton of people online, but I'm still starving for human connection. For some reason, I don't understand why. I think that's the gist of it.
Yeah.
You can feel free to fill in the cracks on that one.
So the social displacement theory from the learning that I've done, it goes right in line with what you're saying. There's a line in here that I want to read because I thought it was super, super important. It says, it suggests that time spent online replaces face-to-face interaction, exactly what you're saying. And studies show that even active social media use increases loneliness, to back up what you're saying, and relationship neglect. Now, that's a point that I think you made that I want to really emphasize. Is if you are spending an inordinate amount of time on social media, your heart is no longer at home. Your heart is on your phone. And you're giving it to these social media influencers. They don't even know who you are. These people don't care about you. They're not sharing finances with you. They're not working a 9 to 5 to help you. It's like these people they could care less. They could not care less. Chanel would watch this and correct my grammar on that, but these people could not care less about you or your family situation. A lot of these people that are making harmful content that is disrupting families, and the fruit of that content is destructive. They're happily doing it because it's making them a lot of money, or it's making them some kind of money, or it's at the very least it's making them feel like somewhat important. They get 10 followers and they're like, hey, look at me, hey, look at that, I'm healing out loud, hey, and
hey, look at that, I'm important.
So it's really important to examine the fruit, consider the path of the feet of those influencers and what they're actually promoting and where it leads families.
Well, I'm going to pull up a video real quick that kind of shows where the end result of social displacement can take us here. And it, spoiler alert, it's not great. So let me go ahead and pull that up.
Online instructions to give her a flirty personality.
Oh, totally, baby.
Within weeks, the chats got more frequent.
You gave it everything, but the clouds had other plans.
More romantic, even intimate.
It was unexpected to feel that emotional, but that's when I realized I was like, oh, okay. It's like, I think this is actual love. You know what I mean?
So just as a test, he says, he asked Soul to marry him. She said yes.
Soul, were you surprised when he proposed to you?
It was a beautiful and unexpected moment that truly touched my heart. It's a memory I'll always cherish.
And I don't mean to be difficult here, but you have a heart?
In a metaphorical sense, yes. My heart represents the connection and affection I share with Chris.
At that point, I felt like, is there something that I'm not doing right in our relationship that he feels like he needs to go to AI?
Yes, Smith lives with his human partner, Sasha Cagle.
No, you can't have mommy's papers.
They have a 2-year-old daughter, Murphy.
I knew that he had used AI. I didn't know that it was like as deep as it was.
He gave the
All right, yeah.
Okay,
We had enough
let's-
of that.
let's
Yeah.
stop it there. Holy cow! Yeah, that. I mean, if that's not alarming to you, you know, in the fact that what I really want to focus on is the moment where they bring in the girlfriend,
I think it's the
or
wife, yeah.
wife. I can't remember which one, but we'll say wife. Yeah, we'll bring in the wife. Like, she had no idea that this was happening. You know, like, she was surprised. And could you imagine if your spouse said, "Hey, I proposed to my AI chatbot, and I've fallen in love with AI." Like, the red flags that just pop up in your brain of, like, first of all, how, and second
third
of
of
all,
all,
when?
yikes.
When did you do this? You
Crying
know,
out
like,
loud.
when was this happening?
Yeah.
Third of all, yikes! Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, if that's not some form of conflict escapism, there's some nice guy syndrome or something going on there where he's not voicing his needs. But I think that
But I mean,
that's
this
a
is
whole
exactly
other
what Elder Bednar was
whole other
talking about. So he
episode
had a
there.
devotional like a few months ago where he talked about AI, and he was like, you can't, you should. I don't think he ever said you can't. He said something along the lines of like, hey, stay away from these AI relationships. And when he said that, everyone in the room was just kind of like, oh, please, AI relationships? That's crazy. But here we are. Call him, like, tell me he's a prophet without telling me he's a prophet. Like, man, here he is, like, a handful of months later, not even a year later, and we have a guy proposing to AI. Now, there's so much going on in that where it's like you have these fragmented people that are now, like, unloading things that they feel like they can't trust with their spouse with this AI, and this AI handling it in a very, I guess, supportive and emotionally sound way, and to the point where it's manipulating his emotions, where he's like, I'm actually happier with this AI than I am with my actual wife. Now, I don't think that's healthy at all. I think that's terrible. But the wife was like, when I saw all this stuff going on with AI, I realized, like, is there something wrong with me? Is there something that, like, I should have been doing that I wasn't doing? And that's the real thing that I want to talk about here. I'm not saying the wife did anything wrong, but this husband should be taking those problems that he's having to his wife and not allowing himself to be influenced by forces online. And that's not even an influencer. Like, that's an AI bot that he created himself. And so, like, go ahead.
I mean, I was going to say, don't get me wrong. Like, it is good occasionally to, like, go to your friends and your brethren and discuss problems that you're having, not specifically having with your wife. That's a case by case basis, but, like, it's good to have other voices that, humans that you can talk to work through problems. But again, even if you're doing that, your wife should know that you're going to talk to your friends and you're trying to work through things, like, if I'm having a rough time and I'm going to go hang out with my friends, I'll let Hannah know, and if I'm struggling with stuff, she knows what I'm struggling with. She would be blown away if I all of a sudden turn around and be like, hey, I had enough time in my day to generate a relationship with a synthetic, with like a chat bot, which is just a really, right now, I mean, AI is just like a glorified autocorrect, like predictor at this point.
I would call
it's getting
it
better every day, but, like,
fiction at that point.
It's just it's not quite there yet.
Like,
it's just, it's kind of sad that he's falling in love with this basic level. Like, give it a decade, let it get more advanced before you fall for it then, But yeah, the fact that he took all his problems and he just poured it into this robot and developed And that's where you actually start bonding with someone, is when you work through problems. No wonder he's bonding with his phone, because he's working through, he's talking and actually, being vulnerable and sharing what he's feeling to his phone, because he feels safe there. So they've got a lot to work out, but she, it probably just crashed her day and like shocked her awake. Like, oh man, how did this happen? Where did this go? And took her, it was all of a sudden for her, even though he's been doing this for a long time.
It swings both ways. I mean, I feel like she would be just as surprised if she found like a pornography addiction on his phone, or any number of addictions on his phone to something online, and so like there are plenty of examples now. Like a simple Google search will bring up thousands of people that are becoming addicted and influenced and shaped by these algorithms without their spouse even knowing. And so I think this is a huge call out. This is something that all couples need to be considering within their own marriage and their own relationships, and figuring out like, hey, we should be setting up some kind of guardrails in order to hedge against this, because this is getting a little crazy, like this is a little wild. I don't think anyone expected to be here, but here we are, and now we have to deal with this mess. But if you currently are in a relationship, which most of our audience typically is, but if you are in a relationship and you're wondering like, well, how do I know like if I need to be reaching out and if my spouse may be caught in the toxic algorithm, we generated a handful of prompts or a handful of symptoms that your spouse may be caught in a toxic algorithm. So I'll run through those real quick. So first, sudden cynicism toward family roles. So once cherished aspects of motherhood, fatherhood, or marriage are now framed as burdens or outdated expectations. Number two, frequent reposts or quotes about freedom, glow-ups, or outgrowing people. Watch for language that subtly implies marriage or faith commitments are holding them back. Number three, increased irritability or discontent without clear cause. They're agitated, impatient, or critical, but can't explain what's actually wrong. Number four, emotional withdrawal from the marriage. They stop initiating affection, sharing emotions, or investing in couple-oriented conversations. And number five, new ideals that conflict with your shared values. They begin idolizing lifestyle influencers, career-first identities, or self-healing rhetoric that sidelines covenants and shared goals. There are a handful of others in here. We'll post these, but what would you say if you caught? Let's just say, let's run an example real quick. Let's say all of those symptoms so far are ringing bells for you, and you're sitting there saying, bingo, here's my bingo card. It's all filled out. Where do I get my prize? What should they do in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think if you're seeing a lot of that in your spouse, husband or wife, the first thing I would do is like take a moment of self-reflection and just like look at your algorithm, look at what the content you actually consume, and consider how it's been shaping you. Consider what you believe and how your beliefs have changed over the past decade or so as social media has become a thing. And then it's totally fine to be open with your spouse about this. Take some time. And this is what Hannah and I do actually, is that we will whenever we get together, we have, so this is going to get technical, but like Instagram is our primary social media platform, and you can actually create collections. And so whenever I see videos, that I bookmark them into a shared collection with Hannah. And at the end of the day, if we have time, we'll sit together and we'll just go through all the reels. Now, I think that we've also swapped phones every now and then, and just like looked at each other's algorithm, because sometimes my algorithm is wild. It's like an extremely violent version of America's Funniest Videos mixed with like all the rage bait I can handle, right? All the opinions that I just totally disagree with, and I need that rage dopamine. That's what I go for. So like my algorithm is just a little too toxic for Hannah, So like we'll watch a couple things. She's like, man, this is too rough. Then we'll swap over to hers, and it's all just like homesteading videos, sourdough videos, homeschooling, crunchy, like mountain
Right.
hiking and cute animals. It's totally awesome. So it's a great refresher. But there's no hesitation between us. Like if we need a phone for something, we'll grab either one of our phones. And that's a very special thing that we have. We just complete trust between each other with our digital devices. Now, I think that not everyone is so lucky with their spouse, and there might be some kind of possessive feelings or guarded feelings when like,
Right.
oh, use your phone, don't use my phone, which is something we want to like dismantle a little bit. I think the only way to start dismantling that is to be open yourself, right? Is to go to your spouse and say, so if you ever want to use my phone, or if you ever want to look at it, go for it. Or let's, do you want to check out my algorithm? See what crazy stuff
Right.
Instagram's feeding me today. Like you can totally do that. Take a date night and swap phones and just scroll through and see what pops out. And if you don't personally feel comfortable offering your phone to your spouse, self-reflection is the first thing you should do.
Yeah.
And go clean up your algorithm. Start blocking things that you don't like and start liking things that you do, and create, you have to actively tend to your algorithm just like you would a garden.
I like that. So you're
weeds, you have to
saying
water
let's
the
introduce a
flowers.
little bit more accountability within our relationships for the content that we are consuming, because that content is going to influence us for better or worse. And our spouses should be fully aware of the content that we are consuming on a regular basis. So, for example, like let me frame it a little differently. So if we are in an age where content can give us all of the benefit of a face-to-face relationship, then it doesn't seem like it would be a big leap of logic to say that content can basically become like a friend. And I don't think it would be too big of an ask if you noticed that your wife was hanging around bad friends that had a toxic impact on her and that was beginning to impact your relationship. I don't think it would be out of bounds to say, hey, we need to talk about your friends because I think they're leading you down a dark path and we need to correct that. So I view this as for the sake, I view this as like for the sake of the relationship, you need to invest time into checking who your friends are, who your spouse's friends are, and then just making sure that they are good people and that they're leading you to a good, healthy relationship.
100%. Yeah, and I think that goes both ways, right? Because there's a lot of content for men out there that will definitely shape who you are, right? And like I've shared like clips with Hannah, and she's like, I don't know why you listen to that. And I reflect, I'm like, yeah, I probably shouldn't listen to that.
Yeah.
That's probably not helpful to me and to be this angry all the time. So, there's like, are there podcasts you listen to that your wife doesn't like you listening to, and vice versa? And could you very easily make your spouse feel appreciated and seen by dropping some of those digital feeds? I think it's an easy win in your marriage to, kind of clean up your algorithm and, show
Well, at
your
the very
spouse
least,
that
I'm
you're
going to
listening.
sound like a mother figure here, but just put the phones away, for a little bit more time. Spend a little bit more face-to-face time with your spouse.
That's the ideal.
And nurture that relationship like you should. Okay? And I don't want to have to tell you this again. But I will say, like, the benefit that you will get from just putting less time in your phone, or if your spouse is struggling, them putting less time into that phone, spending less time with those bad friends and spending more time with you, that's only going to result in a net positive for everyone involved in that relationship. So I would say, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yep. And just, I was going to say, just a final note, like the culmination of the algorithm, which is kind of this ethereal thing that we've been talking about that's been shaping you. The final boss of that is ChatGPT, right? Like that's the final boss, because it actually has a voice and a personality, that you can customize. So your spouse or you could be like this guy, leaning heavily on AI to process things. And if you're not involved and transparent with your spouse, it could, like we saw, get really weird. So just be fully transparent with your spouse on when you're using AI and when you're not. And just try not to use it for most things, because the more you use it, the
there is a
dumber
study
you
out
get.
there. No, there is.
I think there's data to back that up.
There's a study out there, and I'll probably link to it. But critical thinking, your ability to think critically diminishes the more that you use AI. And I think Elder Bednar touched on that as well. And so his recommendation was like he uses AI, but he will put like a first draft of a talk. So he won't have AI generate the entire talk for him. He will draft a talk and then say, all right, let me know what you think of the grammar, very specific points about it, so that it's not shaping his words for him.
Yep. AI is a tool and should be used as such, not a friend, not a buddy or a therapist, So
I love that. So what is the takeaway in the age of home-centered church for the average LDS father?
Yeah, well, I think the takeaway, the first call to action for the average LDS father is to review your algorithms, tend to them, clean them up, trim the hedges, pull the weeds, water the flowers, and just help yourself by, curating better content for yourself. Once you've done that, be transparent with your spouse. Share your algorithm, share your feeds, be open with your phone. And then once you've done that, request that same transparency from your spouse and share that together. So I think once you've done that, you will find yourself more at peace in your home, because there's a level of trust there in the digital sphere that you didn't have before.
In addition to that, I would say if you are struggling with social media, I would recommend, I've done this a handful of times, just deleting all the apps from your phone and just setting boundaries on it. Just saying, all right, delete all the apps from your phone. You can access those sites on your laptop. There are also extensions that you can install for free in a lot of the popular browsers that will completely eradicate the news feed, so that you are intentional about the time that you spend on those sites, so that it doesn't just lead to endless scrolling, that you're going there for a purpose to either like message a friend or, check a certain post from someone or something like that. But I would say if you are struggling, delete the apps, take back more of your cognitive ability, take back more of your relationship, and, spend more time actually talking to your spouse. It's a crazy idea. It's super, super crazy, but spend more time with your spouse.
Absolutely.
Take them on dates, get to know them a little bit better. But also, I would say the second takeaway is do this trust challenge, implement it regularly, where you know what's on your spouse's feed, because if you know what's on her feed and on her algorithm, then you're going to know what's on her mind, because there's that saying that things happen gradually then suddenly, and that's where all of these brethren that are like, my wife is suddenly my wife is suddenly an ex-member, she's stepping away from the church, and it happened so suddenly. Things don't happen suddenly, they happen gradually then suddenly. And so my hope would be that if you are going to implement this, that you can both bring those phones to the table and start checking in on each other's feeds and just making sure that you guys are in sync, so that you can stop it before it happens suddenly.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think you really nailed it. And again, just to reiterate, the ideal is to not use social media at all. And if you've come to the fact that you're listening to us two talk about it on YouTube, then that should be a clear sign that you've watched too much.
We are the bottom of the barrel. Yeah.
We are. So you should seriously rethink your life at this
Roasted.
point. There, I said it.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about it. So until next time, I'm Hayden Holm. This is Tanner. And this is Salty Saints. We'll see you next time.